So how was your Valentine's Day? Did you do anything fun?
Here's the deal. I am sure Kristen would like me to do more for Valentine's Day. We've spent so many years downplaying it. But for once this year, I think I had a good excuse not to do something big for her. She is now teaching full time at a school for third graders. And let me tell you, I didn't have to get her anything because she came home with barrels of treats and cards and gift cards. I didn't know Valentine's was a big like school holiday for
It's
teachers,
a big holiday now.
but it's a big deal. And so I didn't feel bad at all when she got home because at first I was like, oh, I didn't do anything. When she got home, I was like, oh my gosh, she had like a full box of crumble cookies and like all these treats and cards.
I need to go right now. Like I have to leave right now and go anywhere and get those chocolate covered strawberries half off. Yeah. They're all on sale all across town.
I bet HEB has them. Yeah.
Ooh. Yeah. Okay. Well, let's keep this short.
Okay.
We went to see Bruce Springsteen. The boss.
What?
He was in concert last night.
What a treat.
It was a treat. We went, it was in the Toyota Center.
Okay.
And so it was really fun. Yeah. I don't think I realized that I didn't know that many songs of his.
Until you got there.
I did also note that mostly Gen Xers were there.
Why are you so self-conscious about being Gen X?
I'm not that much. Well, maybe a little bit sometimes, but I have never seen that many 50-year-old white guys dancing.
Well, they were living their best life.
They were everywhere. And I just thought, this is like an endangered species in the wild.
Boomers listen to Bruce Springsteen.
Yes, you're right.
He's been around a long time. He's been around.
He's in his 70s. He sounded great.
I bet you grew up listening to him because your parents listened to him.
No, my parents weren't. They weren't Bruce. No, they were maybe more country.
Oh.
I think for them, Bruce Springsteen was rock and roll.
Okay.
I don't know. But it was pretty fun. It was a good concert. And we brought the one thing that you have to survive a concert at our age.
A fanny pack.
No, close. But I don't think you can bring fanny packs into these places anymore.
No.
Earplugs.
Yeah.
We brought little earplugs. So oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Game changer.
Good.
I am getting to the point where I have to wear earplugs just to see like movies.
Whoa.
My ears have become sensitive.
Yeah.
And I mean, now I put those things in and it cuts out like a good 60% of it.
Yeah.
And then I am ready to rock and roll.
Then you definitely don't need headphones on during these episodes. Like we don't need to give you headphones.
No, it's pretty loud. Like it's pretty, and I can hear every little off sound I make, which is really distracting.
Yeah.
But I will say what I love to do at a concert is dance. And so
I would love video
we were
of this.
high enough.
Is there any video of you dancing?
Actually, Andy, okay, so we're sitting way up high.
Yeah.
Way up high.
Was it Energy?
It was the Toyota Center.
Okay.
So we're pretty high up. Not like NRG high up, but and we're kind of behind Bruce.
Oh.
And we're actually like closer to him than most of the crowd, but they could actually see the front of him.
Yeah.
We were behind him, and I think our seats were, really affordable.
Yeah.
And but I felt weird, like no one in our section was standing up to dance.
Oh no, you're
like,
too far away. Yeah.
Yeah, we set out here. It just had this vibe of we set out here for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
We're not getting up to dance.
Yeah.
And so at one point, there's a song I have to dance to. So I moved to the end of the row.
Oh, wow.
So that nobody's behind me.
Yeah.
And I'm just dancing by myself. I'm the only one standing up in my section of 200 people. And that's the video where Andy videos me.
Oh, I need to text me.
And he sends it to Olivia and says, and all it says is, come get your mother. I'm just like, I love... You're
just having your best life.
It was my best life, and it was so fun.
You think Bruce will come on the show? Did you get to meet him?
You know what? I'm reaching out to his people. You know who Andy told me that we should reach out to?
What?
Bono. He's got a new book out, and Bono's a believer.
Wow.
And he goes, you never know.
Yes, you never know.
I go, I don't know. I kind of do know.
Yeah. Yeah.
That would be a really wild reach.
Yeah. Well, we do actually have someone who is just as good as Bono and Bruce Springsteen with us today. So do you want to get started?
Let's get started. Hey, everybody, and welcome to the Almost Amazing Dinner Party. You're with us today on episode number 96. We have 4 more until we unveil our new name.
Yep.
And we go with a new format, which we found is not much different than our old format.
Nope.
Other than the fact that you can watch us now.
Yes.
And hopefully you can watch us in double the speed like you do on when you're listening.
Double YouTube speed. I think
I'm actually just trying to double my own personal speaking style, the speed. I try to match the speed of morning radio hosts.
I would like you to pull your mic down though.
Okay, back with the mic.
Goodness gracious.
So this is what I want to talk about today. I was telling my team, I'm like, let's all get in the car and let's drive to Kentucky to be in this huge revival. Have you heard about this in Asbury?
Yes, there is a worship service that has been going for like 5 or 6 days now.
It has been going on for a week today. It started Wednesday of last week. And it was just a regular, like this is a Christian university in Kentucky. And they were having a regular chapel. And I even watched the video of where, he's giving the message and he's talking about real love that comes from God and the love that we have to have.
Side note, classic youth pastor on stage. He's got the facial, like it's just, he is, I'm looking at the guy, I'm like, that's me. Like that's like an average pastor, like launching this revival.
But then it has turned into a week long, and now people are driving in from all over the country, like Texas, Mississippi, Alabama, to be and it was so wild on video to see people in other languages around the world tuned in watching this live.
Are they live streaming now?
Well, people are TikToking live.
Sure, they're live streaming.
So what I thought was cool is growing up, if you've grown up in the Christian faith, we're always talking about bring revival. We want revival. We have this hunger for revival. And I was telling Andy how exciting that revival is broken out. Like I haven't been in a time where we've experienced that in too long.
Yeah.
So I'm really pumped about what's happening there. And of course, Andy's like, well, he's a lot more tempered.
Yeah. I was about to say, I probably have some thoughts about it that match what Andy was saying. Part of me is like, at a certain point, you don't want to be the guy to end it now. You know what I'm saying? Like,
how do you end the revival?
How do you say, okay, we got to wrap it up?
Hey, a few of you need to get to class.
Because like at a certain point, it's a self-fueling fire in that like it's been going so long and it's cool that it's going so long. We got to keep it going so long. I hope that's not the case. I hope it is genuine revival. But the cynic in me is like,
well, it's funny because we did talk about how can you tell when you're experiencing revival. And this is what I want to talk about. This is the power of they were talking about what is the fruit of the revival? What is coming out of that?
Yeah. Because that's not just worshiping God is not, to me, the end goal of a revival. It's not for everyone to walk and be like, I feel closer to God. Like there's got to be something coming out of it.
Well, and I too think, so Andy sent me an article. Thank you, Andy, for this. Beg God to move again, 7 marks of a true revival. And I thought it was interesting that one was faithful preaching. So obviously when you're listening to the preaching, if it's lining up with gospel teachings about Christ, and that's great. Unceasing prayer. And it's interesting because of the videos I have seen that they have just a passion for praying and just like communicating, praying together.
What else are you going to do all day? Like you can't just sing songs all day.
Another one is precious unity. And that is just coming together, all being of the same spirit. Earnest seeking. And that is, just seeking God's will in their lives, seeking God's voice just to see him move in their lives. And then pervasive repentance. And this is the part where I just thought that right there,
pervasive
repentance. Yes. You see bits and pieces of what's happening there, but I think power of revival is to really spend time in deep repentance of just telling God, these are my sins, and just being honest with God and coming face to face and just surrendering our lives on our face before him again.
Eating the microphone.
Justin, that is not, you cannot be.
I thought you were going to put it inside of your mouth.
So I think that repentance, and I think so easily we move out of the practice of repentance in our lives. How about that? I don't think I'm spending time in that. I'm being just really brutally honest before God about how I'm not trusting him with everything I should. I'm not giving him everything I should. I'm not depending on him. And sometimes I do fall into, habits that are just terrible. 6, is just a spectacular evangelism.
Are they evangelizing?
Effective
That's what I'm saying.
evangelism.
Like all these things you can't really adequately evaluate. Like you don't think there's any kids there that are just glad school's canceled and like let's keep those.
I don't think they're canceling. I think people are coming and going. But now there's just like a line around. I mean, it's like a line to get in that's so long. But what it reminds us of that people are hungry to experience the Spirit of Jesus Christ. They are hungry to be in a community of deep worship. And I was talking to my team about this, and this is a sad thing being a grown adult, is that you don't as often as a full-grown adult experience the intimacy of communal worship with people around you like you did when you were a young adult, when you're in college and high school, and everybody would come together and they would just confess and be connected like that. We don't find ourselves doing that as adults. We're a lot more pragmatic. We're a lot about time, schedule, get this done. And we sort of shelter ourselves from that level of intimacy with the people.
Yeah, it's not surprising that it's starting at a college campus.
No,
that's not surprising.
Don't you love the passion and availability of college students?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's.
I love that.
Like I said, I would love to see what comes out of it. I would love to hear, I don't know, testimonies a year later from what's happening because of
Well,
this.
I'll let you know when we get back.
Well, what's going to happen if you get all the way there and they've shut it down? Like, guys,
I'm sure there's a Chick-fil-A near. We're obviously not going because my team has
maybe
kids.
it's by the Noah's Ark experience. You could hit that up.
Maybe so.
I don't know
Maybe so. But I'm excited to see it. I'm really happy to see it. And, and we joke about the camp high, the Thursday night at camp, when everybody's really emotional and and they talk about, and youth pastors are like, experts is talking about how to keep the youth high, how to keep the camp high all year long, how to keep that going in your life.
Yeah. Well, I would say I'm also happy that TikTok has something, and I don't know how many people see it that aren't Christians. You know what I'm saying? Because the algorithm.
Sure.
Like, I don't think someone who's into like the worst parts of society is getting shown this content.
Sure.
But it is encouraging to see more of this content, that there's like something happening in social media world that's ultimately really positive. And yeah, there's some Christians that are skeptical like me and Andy, but ultimately there's a lot of, good, like it's still going. It's so exciting. Like God's moving. We're so happy for this. And every clip you see is genuine. It seems like, the people that are in the room are genuinely worshiping and excited about it. So I'm thankful that TikTok is being used for something that is positive. And hopefully some people outside of Christian world are seeing this content and being prompted to be curious about it and to wonder what's going on. And I hope it becomes so big that it breaks through the TikTok algorithm and like more people are seeing it.
I agree. And I hope it sends people on missions, continues to spread the gospel around the world. Yeah. I'm excited for them. And I'm really excited about what this will do for their campus. I think it's cool.
What's the school called?
Asbury. I think it's Asbury University. It's in Kentucky.
Maybe Olivia should go there.
I did actually think about maybe it's a good time for a college visit.
She visits the college.
Olivia, you've never heard of this university.
I don't
know if you've heard of Kentucky.
A year later, she starts and they're still worshiping. It's just like it's just constant. Like they're just
like Olivia, listen, this is really amazing. You're really gonna have to go to class. We paid for that.
That's so funny. Well, I'm glad to hear that. I've been keeping up a little bit. I have something funny I want to share with you before we talk to our guest. The other day, my son at bedtime just burst into tears.
What?
Just weeping. And when kids get tired, something can trigger them. But it wasn't anything happening in the moment. He started weeping and he said, "At the Easter egg hunt, I'm not going to get any eggs." And he's already having anxious thoughts about the Easter egg hunt.
What?
Because it's such this like big swarm of people.
It's a pretty intense event.
And if you're not a competitive kid, which y'all do a great job of doing it age appropriate so that like fifth graders aren't running over first graders. But even if you're one of the less enthusiastic, kindergartners, like your parents have to help you. And so I don't know what triggered him, but he was just weeping about it. We're like, we can do an egg hunt at home, where it's just you and Maggie and you get like, you don't have to worry about that. Like, but it was just such this random out of nowhere. He was having anxiety about the Easter egg.
Well, he's not alone. We're already thinking about the Easter egg hunt. He's not the only one.
But our Easter egg hunt is a huge, huge outreach, a huge moment for our church. I am a huge fan of it. I love it. We're going to be there anyway.
That is the sweetest
We just had to assure him that he would get eggs somewhere else if he doesn't get
Maybe it's a good time to go ahead and say that it will be at Evelyn's Park this year.
Yeah.
And that is a much bigger crowd. Mm-hmm. And so you tell Bear, I've got my eye on his experience. I'm going to make sure that.
Yeah. But by and large, it truly is incredible.
We had to literally block out parents from being part. Like we have to hold them back because they were just like all up in it and just like grabbing and
some of the worst people come over against.
It's like you don't need 1,000 eggs.
Yeah. We, in my previous church, we had a really great space, lots of land. And so we would do an Easter egg hunt, but before we do a program, they'd invite some juggler or magician or something, and they'd do a program inside, share the gospel, all that. Then they'd start. And so
do they actually hide the eggs? Like we don't have that opportunity.
No, it's not hidden.
It is the big dump.
Yes, it's just a dump. But like we were kind of, outside getting things set up and some parents were already waiting to start. And we were like, hey, there's a program inside. We'd love for y'all to go in and check out. I was like, oh, we know we've been here before. And they were just like waiting at the front of the line. And I was like, God,
falling for
that's
that gospel.
The part of outreach events. I'm just like, you are just here for the wrong reason.
It's different this year. We've added something.
Yes. But it's just like, that's the part that, the 1% that I like.
That's when you have to be friendly, like, oh, we get it for sure.
Yeah. But anyway, for the most part, I think really I have seen if you're looking for a church, like the Easter egg hunt is the front door for a lot of families.
Absolutely.
Like it's, hey, we just moved to the area. We saw this egg hunt. We had a great time, and they come to church literally the next day.
Yes, it's our big invitation to all of our Easter services.
It's huge,
and so
I really love it, and I'm a fan of it. But my son is a little bit worried about it. So.
Well, we'll have to figure out a way to protect his little heart. Oh my goodness! Well, talking about protecting our little hearts today. And the fact that are you just loving my transitions?
Ooh, you did it.
Maybe more. Look at him experiencing anxiety. That is literally what we're talking about today with our amazing guest. I'm so excited she's here with us. Please welcome Brittany Senseman. She's a professional counselor, and we have been trying to get you on the show for a while now.
Yes.
And finally we ran into each other at the women's retreat.
Great.
And thankfully they were talking about, past hurts and anxiety. And we just stumbled into a conversation, and Brittany's like, so let me know when's a good time to be on the show. And I'm like, oh yeah, tomorrow. Like, what are you doing tomorrow? Like, would that be a possibility?
She's too available. We gotta,
Justin and I really do think I come across a little needy sometimes with people. Whoa. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
We're excited to see you today. And there are a few things that we really want to talk about. The first one is anxiety. Now, you are a counselor and you counsel adolescents, adults, children. Would you say right now that anxiety is just one of the pervasive things facing everyone?
For sure. I mean, I think it has looked different in the past few years. Like, okay, so pandemic anxiety looked different and showed up for different people at different times, I think for different reasons, because the pandemic affected different people at different points more intensely and less intensely. That was fascinating to watch as compared to, say, Harvey, where that was one event. It was, singular over a few days, really, really intense, but the effects, obviously, especially for some years long. So yeah, I think our community has definitely had an increase in anxiety. And I think that is not unique for this community.
Did you see coming out of the pandemic that there was also almost like a PTSD connected to that? People like having a hard time finding stability or fear of just like this collapse of the normal?
Yeah,
I think. Or is that just me?
Yeah.
Is that mine?
Listen, you're not getting free therapy out of this. Okay, like
it's okay. I'll bill her later. Like, don't worry about it.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I think again the pandemic experience was really different for different people because so just on a simple scale, like extroverts, introverts, right, are going to have a very different reaction to the lockdown situation. Some people, the locking down was easy, the coming out was hard. Others, the locking down was hard, the coming out was easy. So I think everyone struggled. It really was just a question of when. The other thing I really have seen is when the stress peaked on, say, the family unit or the marriage, those peaks happened, the stress peaks happened at different points in time, again, for different reasons. And some of them are financial because we've had the economic stress also lately. And so that has added another layer on top of it. So I think it's all stressful and it all leads to a variety of symptoms showing up at a variety of times and people's ability to manage Varies. It just varies.
Sure. Now, we were talking on our way in here, and I was like, so has it been really busy? And you said you had a 6 weeks of slow period 3 years ago.
Yeah. So I was like, I think we've had a 6-week lull in like March of 2020, and that was it. I mean, it's the demand for counseling has not changed, decreased. I don't even know that it's increased. I mean, I feel like it's been pretty constant as far as, new inquiries coming in and people staying busy. It's been pretty steady.
I do know that in my everyday life, more and more people are seeing a counselor. Like used to, you would know people that were seeing a counselor, they're going through a hard time, or if a marriage was struggling, we're going to see, a therapist. But now it's really pretty consistent that people in my life are just visiting with a counselor. And now I'm at the point where like, maybe I need a counselor just to visit with.
I wasn't going to say anything, but I'm glad you brought it up.
I didn't want to be the one.
An intervention.
I didn't want to be the one that brings all of this up.
An elaborate intervention.
So we talked about, these are my questions about anxiety, because I've grown up dealing, and I always called it being afraid all the time. Like I felt fearful, and mostly at night. Like I did not feel safe ever at night going to bed. I felt afraid every single night of my life until I was 23 and I lived in a building with tons of other people, and an armed guard was the first time I remember feeling really safe. And so I always had all of these ideas of what could happen. So when people started talking about anxiety, I didn't connect the fact that what I had experienced was a type of anxiety. Are you finding that anxiety is something that is genetic?
There's definitely a genetic component to anxiety and mood disorders, among other disorders, ADHD, a long list of. So they're learning more about the genetic component. It's the nature and nurture question, right? Like how much of it is in nature, how much of it is in nurture, meaning environmental influence.
Sure.
And so my to get all medically around here, my opinion is it really, I think, follows the diathesis stress model, which is basically you have a genetic predisposition and then you have environmental stressors that basically it's like you have a switch that can get turned on genetically, and then something happens and triggers the switch to get flipped on. And then whether or not that switch can be turned off, my experience is that no, in general, it does not get turned off, but you can manage. You learn how to manage it better.
That's a really good way to put that. I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, I've heard that a lot of disorders or diseases or lots of things work that way. It's like you may be prone to cancer, but the right carcinogen has to hit you to like flip it on or whatever. So like It just depends. That's why some people can smoke 1,000 cigarettes in their lifetime and never get cancer, and then some people get it from just a secondhand smoke. Like it just depends on your like genetics.
Now, Justin, you don't seem to me like a person who struggles with a lot of anxiety.
I do not.
You are correct. That is a good assessment.
I like how you say that. Like,
I do not.
I do not. It is like a superpower of not.
I don't know. It's probably some sort of coping mechanism from childhood of just like disassociating from chaos and just like kind of like protecting myself from getting too wrapped up in the outcome of things. So like, we could talk to her all day about that probably if we put her on the clock, but I think it's very much rooted in growing up in chaos a little bit and then just kind of like backing off from a little. And so nothing riles me because I, grew up in kind of a chaotic environment. So you, on the other hand, probably grew up in a very safe environment. I mean, you had two great parents that were pretty, you know what I'm saying?
Yes, like, two great, loving, amazing parents.
So maybe that's a different thing. But yes, as far as anxiety goes, I don't think I've suffered with it. Obviously, my wife has faced it specifically after having children. She suffered with PPD and PPA. So I've seen it in other people, and like it's made it really hard to empathize, but I can recognize it pretty quickly. Like I can be like, hey, this is to me a higher level of anxiety than would normally be in this situation. Mm-hmm. Not that I'm like a professional, but it's just I can objectively look at things differently, I think, because but I can't empathize. I can't sit there and hold your hand through it and be like, oh, I know how hard this is. I'm so sorry.
You're kind of like, you just need to you just got to get over this.
We got to fix it. Like, let's figure out how to fix it. So that's not always the best situation, but I think that's part of it. But I mean, I've got other mental issues, I'm sure, that we could talk about.
I'm sure that could be a whole nother show.
A whole other show.
We'll have Brittany back. We've got more things to talk about.
But I'm glad you're talking about more people having therapists and counselors, however you want to phrase it. Like, I'm thankful for that. And I'm happy that it's become less taboo. I'm happy that it's becoming hopefully more available. That's the problem is that even as it becomes less taboo, not everybody is privileged enough to be able to pay for it or afford it. And so that's a frustration for me.
That is true.
I do love that we have a partnership with Stitch Ministries through the CityRise Network, and they offer free counseling as a ministry. And so if you want to look up cityrise.org/resources, you can find connection, or just Google STCH Ministries, and they've got some free counseling options. If you're hearing about this or know somebody who needs counseling but doesn't have the resources for it, which is honestly the biggest barrier for most, I think, even more so now than the like taboo nature of it.
I agree.
So another thing that I think, okay, so I know that you are a believer. Are you seen as a Christian counselor? Is that part of your package? And the reason I ask is Andy's reading this book, Forgiveness. I think it's Tim Keller, maybe. And they're talking about how now counselors, if you're in a situation, a relationship, and you have a problem with someone in your life, they are no longer leading you to forgiveness. They feel like that is putting a moral expectation on someone. So they no longer, if you're angry or bitter with someone, they no longer lead you to forgiveness. It's you're having to learn how to manage anger and bitterness. And they don't put forgiveness as a part of the process. Do you find, have you seen that? Do you see the difference in that? Or
that's interesting. I'm not familiar with that specifically. The question, am I a Christian counselor? Yes. I mean, like on my bio on my website, like I explicitly state I have a Christian worldview. It's interesting to me though. Many people will see me who are not Christians. They don't seem to mind and care. And I'm like, that's fine, And I always ask, what role does faith play in your life? Because even if someone says they're a Christian, that varies wildly on how much does that impact every day or a relationship, or like how are you utilizing your faith as a support? But the question about forgiveness is interesting. It sounds like they're maybe making it more of a boundaries issue. And it's like, well, if I'm angry, that means a boundary has been crossed. And so I need to understand what boundary, or I don't know. I can see it from that perspective. And I can understand why forgiveness has a, I guess, moral tenor to it. But I think, that's interesting. I'm not familiar with that specifically being like forgiveness as a thing to avoid.
Isn't that interesting that it's not, it's like it's out there, but they don't utilize it because they connect it with like a moral belief.
Would you recommend someone who is a strong believer to only go to someone who has a Christian worldview, or do you think that's negotiable?
A good question.
I think it really depends on what you're looking for. I also think it depends on what you have access to go to what you were mentioning previously. So if, for example, you have a specific phobia, flying. You need to fly for your work. You've had a traumatic experience, or you just always had trouble flying and you can't get on a plane. If the therapist with availability that is in your fee range, who can get you in, is not a Christian and you're working something very specific, I think that's totally fine. I think for more, I'll say, pervasive or less clearly defined issues, I think having a similar worldview is just helpful because there's a language, there's a, it's just a worldview that, while, obviously we can understand and you can empathize, and of course our training assists us in working with any population. I think it's just easier, just similarly like your friend group, right? Or any other person that you're going to pour out your life to.
Sure.
It's easier. You don't have to agree, but it's easier to do so when there's a common ground.
That's a really good piece of advice. That's a great question too. I would that's great. So we were also discussing another big thing that you said that you're kind of running into is faith deconstruction. So tell us how you define deconstruction and what you're seeing out there.
Yeah, that has been interesting because deconstruction first, I feel like, has a very negative connotation.
Sure.
And I think in the faith community, what I've seen is that it's people who do go through the deconstruction process end up walking away from the faith. And so it's viewed very negatively. It also seems to have a very young, millennial-ish feel to it. And actually what I'm seeing in my office is more people my age. And I think, and they also are afraid to use the term deconstruction, like I saw a podcast or I saw an article and it had deconstruction in it. They're confessing almost to me about it. And I find it a little confusing, really, because my understanding of that word is, and the process that I see people going through is really just they're asking questions and they're re-examining the faith that they were maybe given as a heritage or that they experienced in other points in their life, and they're at a different place. And what I think is happening is, again, because it's people my age who we got a few years, right? Like, we've kicked the tire around a few times, and I was taught this, that faith, if I do these things, I will be blessed, right?
Right. Yep.
And then what happened? Like where's the blessing? Like life got hard. And so it's not equating. And so then it's like, this is false. Something about this equation, A plus B is not equaling C. So I think hard. It's trying to understand what about this didn't fit. And I think that's a great question to ask. I think that's honestly a vital question to ask. Sure. And that's where I wonder, I don't know the language part of it as far as how that goes, but I don't know that as a faith community, we need to be afraid of that. I'm like, no, bring the questions. My faith can stand it. Right. Like, I don't think God's scared of us saying this isn't right or this doesn't feel fair. And I'm like, the Bible's full of people saying this isn't right and this doesn't feel fair.
Right. Well, and I think you're right, because it's almost like people are afraid, like, to ask those questions shows a lack of faith. But it really doesn't. It shows like not true, a true follower. Yeah. And I will be honest with you. Sometimes I'll ask a question at a group of believers, and it's almost like they talk down to you, like, what you really need to understand is, and you're like, dude, I know. I've been raised in the faith. You don't have to talk to me like a 4-year-old. This is hard. Yeah. This doesn't make sense.
I think a lot of it is unraveling bad teaching. And so that's what I see most, is people saying, just talking about what they were taught. And I was like, that was wrong. Like, it was an incorrect teaching, and to be frustrated with an entire belief system because some Sunday school teacher in 3rd grade couldn't answer your question about why babies die with cancer adequately. To me, it's just such a heavy thing to place on imperfect humans. And so a lot of the negative side of deconstructing I see is latching on to bad teaching, like, well, this was wrong. It's like, it was wrong. I agree. And if you talk to any reasonable Christian, they would agree. Like, they would say, that's not exactly, but we were taught so poorly in some situations because people with good hearts but not the right training were trying to communicate really big issues to children. And so, and you face it, I'm sure, as a children's minister.
Pressure.
Yeah, I was in student ministry for 10 years, and I look back and I'm like, oh my gosh, did I say anything to like scar children that was like totally off? Because I'm a 21-year-old dude, like trying to like throw pizza parties and also make Jesus relevant. And so it's just,
you're trying to get kids to eat weird stuff out of a can.
I'm trusting that the Holy Spirit protected the kids in that moment.
Of course.
Because my heart was on him, and I can't think of anything specifically, but the bad teaching, I think, is the source of deconstruction. It's not so much, I don't think God's real. It's like there's specific questions they face that you said they're seeing is not true. And so they're just like throwing out the whole, on the bad end. On the positive end of it, it's a reconstruction, I think, as opposed to a deconstruction.
Correct. And if people are being taught, it just seems like God should make everything right. Like, he should be addressing those people doing things like that should be addressed.
Right. And saying that he will isn't enough. Saying that,
eventually he will.
Like, that's the whole point of the return of Jesus.
That will be addressed.
He's going to solve all this, but nobody wants to hear that. They want to talk about.
No, they want they want it now. Like, I need that now.
And I think as humans, our big struggle is why suffering. Right. I mean, I think absolutely. That feels so wrong.
Right. And especially when so much of the part is a life of joy, a good life that God blesses. I mean, a day in this, it's just so many scriptures that support that. And you just feel like you have a raw deal. And you're just like, I did all of this, and look what happened. This is all a load. This is
exactly,
but what are some steps that you recommend people take as they're like, what's some of your advice?
Don't be afraid. Go in. If your faith isn't fitting, my main thing is make it work. Like figure out what doesn't fit. Take the time. And this is where, yes, I recommend journaling. But take the time and journaling is helpful. I'm a terrible journaler personally, actually, but there is something about how our brains work that it does facilitate clarity in thinking. It also enables us to put something away if we need to put something away. But take the time to write out, what am I mad about? What am I hurt about? What are my feelings here? Where are they coming from? Like ask the big hard questions and see if you can put it down on paper somewhere, and then go find someone that you trust that you can talk to about it. If that's a counselor, a pastor, a good friend who again shares the same worldview. I don't think this is the time to get a lot of outside voices, and that is something that I've told people, when you are searching, when you are really trying to understand these things, be very intentional about the voices you're listening to, because it is. You can find anything. I mean, literally anything if you're looking. So find what you already knew to be true before, or the voices that are you're confident, and don't go outside of that now. You can explore later. Now's not the time to explore. So mainly it's getting clear on it and taking the time and taking it seriously, because I think a lot of people don't want to think about it because it's hard.
Do you have any idea about how long a deconstruction normally?
No.
How long that whole thing goes?
No, I don't.
I'm sure it varies from person to person, but
yeah, I love what you said about being careful about outside sources, because you're right. Not only can you find anything you want, when we're looking for stuff, we lean so much on, well, this feels true, so it must be true. Like when we find something online that feels better than what God is teaching, then we want to say, well, that must be true then. And that's such, I don't know if it's always been that way, but I think in this day and age, like especially on social media, if it feels true, we immediately believe it. And if it doesn't feel true, we're suspicious. But there's no sort of further digging into that. It's just, if it feels true, it's true. And that to me is so wise when you say, go to real people that you really know, that share your faith, that have background in this. Something we tell our kids is like, hey, your friends are cool, but they don't know what we know. And this is about non-religious things. Like they don't know what we know. Like, yeah, you should ask them what they think, but you need to understand they don't have the experience that we do when it comes to these things you're struggling with. So you can't go to someone who doesn't have the proper understanding to get an understanding. And so I think the same thing said of your faith.
And I do think that it's like, if you've decided, or you're in this process of deconstructing, then you lean on people who have already deconstructed and left their faith. And now they've become evangelists for pulling people out of their faith. Now they're like, join the side where it's free, join where your eyes have been open to see what all of this is. Mm-hmm. And it can be very enticing for someone who's really struggling. And the sad thing to me is you're pulling people out of freedom because they don't understand the freedom that we have in Christ, that Christ gives us freedom. And now they're choosing to be in complete, darkness again because someone has a compelling message that's not based in Scripture.
Yeah, I think it would be perhaps wise to be wary of any faith that completely makes sense. I'm like, if I understood everything, then where's God in that? And how am I not God? Like there's gotta be something that's bigger than me. Like, I don't know, that it actually is reassuring to me to not understand everything. Cause that means, okay, good. Somebody's bigger than me out there doing stuff I don't understand because it's better and it's good. And anyway, so to your point of a system that exists for the purpose of pointing out failings of another system. Yeah, where does that end?
Right, that's not a system. That's
right, right. It's this is wrong. And to your point, like, let's not be afraid of calling bad things bad things. Mm-hmm. I think that's true. I think the other place of hurt, in addition to bad teaching, is sometimes well-intended but hurtful people, mm-hmm. or less well-intended and just hurtful people, mm-hmm. and within the faith community, whether that's an actual church or a staff member or just a person who says they're a Christian. I think those are the two places that I see people have spiritual woundings. Mm-hmm. And we're going to do that, right? Yeah. We're people, and it's the worst. Christians are the best and the worst.
Mm-hmm. Right.
There's no other entity that has entrusted its representation to so many different people.
Right.
You know, like Coca-Cola, the brand Coca-Cola is not represented by billions of people, but Christ is represented by billions of people.
Yeah.
So like,
so risky.
Of course, there's going to be chaos in that representation. That's why you go back to Jesus, the ultimate representation of God, the unfailing representation of God. That's that when someone really is falling apart, you say, okay, listen, you may hate all these people that follow Jesus. Let's talk about Jesus. Right. Let's talk about what we know about Jesus. Let's talk about what's been recorded about him. What about him do you hate? And it's going to be hard for them to come up with something. Like, it's very difficult to find anything at fault in Jesus Christ, like, because there is no fault. Yes. And so if you take them back to that picture of him, they're going to start asking, well, is that really truly what happened? Then it's a whole other conversation. But the representation of Jesus in the Bible is, to me, what you point people to when they say, well, I hate Christians. Like, great. I hate a lot of them too. No, I hate them, but you know what I'm saying? Like, great.
Christians can be hard.
Yes.
Christians can be hard.
Let's go to the ultimate representation of God, which is Jesus Christ. And what do you hate about him? And I don't think they're going to find that much other than just curious about whether or not he's real.
So much of it is out of past hurts. And so many times, if you see them on a video and they're describing what started that journey, I mean, 9 times out of 10, it is a wound. Mm-hmm. And it is a wound from someone within a faith community.
Right.
And that's hard.
Yeah.
That's hard. But you're right. That's the risk. It's the glory and the worst part of.
That's right. And I want to say the positive side, because we're spending time on the negative, but like the beauty of it is those occasions where someone in the name of Christ does something, and it can be so small, but they extend themselves only because of love, only because they were loved and they had the presence of mind and capacity and heart to share it with somebody else. And whether that's a conversation, sharing a meal, going on a mission trip, whatever that looks like those beautiful, beautiful moments where there's no other explanation except we're just going to love here. Like I'm going to love you in this very tiny way. If that's just holding the door open, whatever it is. Those happen all the time. And our brains are literally wired to focus on negative, scary, hurtful things.
Sure. Yes.
We go there without thinking, and we fixate without thinking on those things. And so we forget all of the beautiful, like you're saying, the glorious moments of love and sharing and kindness that are real and really, hopefully, more often. You know, I really do think there is more good there. We are to be the salt and the light. And I think most of the time we do a decent job, you know, and so I think being intentional to focus on, okay, where's the good? Where's the hope? And reminding people that it's there, I think, is key.
Gosh, that's huge. Yeah, we're working against the system of our brains. You're so right. Like anything, whether it's your relationship with your spouse or your kids or anything, you're going to think about the negative thing and literally forget about the 10 positive things.
That's right. That's
it's
right.
just wild to me that that's how our brains work. And I never considered that in regard to someone's experience with the church. Is like they're going to latch on to the one thing they hated and forget all the incredible Sunday school teachers they had and all the really kind people in the youth group that reached out to them. You know, they're just going to forget. And all you can do is remind and point out the good. That's huge.
That's true. Also, too, think that heading into that process to just pray in the beginning, really honestly with God and say, I just am not sure. This is where I am. And you know, Jesus talks about when he's saying, I'm the bread of life. And it was really difficult teaching. And I believe it's in John 6, somewhere around there, after he walks on water.
We won't coach you on that.
But
we won't coach you on that.
Thank you. But he's talking about everyone who my Father gives to me is mine. And so sometimes I feel like we're afraid to lose I
agree.
If you belong to Christ, you are safely in his grips.
That's right.
And sometimes we have a lot of shame about asking questions. And we immediately say, oh God, I'm so sorry. I'm not trying to offend you, but this makes no sense. But we're in the safety of who Christ is. And what I think happens too is as believers, sometimes we act like we're trying to we were laughing as our kids stuff team. Some kids were like, oh, what about science says this and this? And we're like, oh, we're not talking about science today. We try and really friendly keep faith in this easy space rather than going, yeah, let's talk about the science today. Bring it up. Tell me what you got. And so sometimes we feel like we're trying to keep this picture really perfect.
Right.
And
Like it
sometimes
has to
it's
make
so-
sense.
Yes. And it's so much more destructive because it begins to feel really fake and not authentic and not like tough.
Yeah.
Like it can't survive very
Right.
much.
Right.
And so I think that I love the way that you're counseling in that way. What a really refreshing thing it would be for someone to talk to you about that and get those messages rather than, anyway. I think that's
faith
really
is not
good.
so fragile.
So speaking of things that are fragile, do you also talk about marriages as well?
Oh,
Do you
yeah.
do marital counseling?
I do.
Are there problems with marriages today?
So
Couple, one or
so
two.
I am curious because what are, and we didn't even talk about this as something we might discuss,
Yeah.
but since you are a marriage counselor
Yeah.
and we have you here.
Yeah.
What are some of the things that marriages are struggling with these days, especially with technology and phones? And what are some of the biggest challenges you're seeing out on the street?
Out on the street. So man, my brain is going in a million different directions. I'm going to give you one of the things that I end up telling pretty much every couple that I talk to. Within every relationship, there exists a dynamic that looks like this. Like you have someone in who appears to have more power, and you have somebody else who appears to have less power. So it's this power differential that exists. And typically the way that shows up is the person with the power tends to say more words. They don't even have to be mean words, but they just have more words. And the person with less has less words. They're communicating less. And this is very common in a relationship, right? In a marriage, that you're going to have a talker and some version of a talker and some version of a non-talker, not necessarily super extreme.
Not necessarily a listener. Note.
Right. That's a key point. So this dynamic is inherently flawed. This will always create conflict. I think for fairly obvious reasons, right? Like if one person feels like they have the power, then that is not that they're going to be condescending, right, toward this other person. If this person feels like they're getting squashed all the time, they're going to be resentful of the person with the power. So this is an inherently bad dynamic. The goal is to make it meet, right? So then the work becomes the person who is talking more has to listen, and the person who is not speaking has to speak. And the interesting part is both parties are equally responsible for their work. So just because a person is the talker, that doesn't mean the non-talker's off the hook. Even if they're maybe get loud sometimes, maybe they get angry, maybe they say things they shouldn't say. It is equally their partner's job to say, hey, I didn't like that. That hurt my feelings. Or this is actually what I need. I figured out. I have a need. Here it is. Let me give it to you. Let me hand it to you.
So you see the power balance as something that's consistently
every relationship.
Let me ask you this or share this. You might find it shocking, but I've had this issue in my marriage. And so we had to find a way to get Kristen to communicate comfortably.
That's right.
She couldn't think as fast as I could. And so I would be begging her to speak. And she's like, she couldn't get the words. And so one of the biggest points of tension in our marriage, we actually sat down and wrote out what we wanted to say and prepared it and then came together and read it to each other. I had to change the way I communicated to allow her the space to speak. Cause I understood that in my head. I was like, I need you to talk. I am talking too much.
But you're there at her. I need you to say something.
Yes.
Say anything.
Right.
I'll wait right here and stare right at your face.
Hey, I figured
while
it out.
you figure it out
supportively.
Yes. But I was like, well, I know that she always would text me really deep conversations. I was like, why are you doing this over text message? And I started realizing this is how she processes her thoughts and how she communicates. So it's like, well, what's a better way? Let's meet in the middle. Let's write out our thoughts and then come talk about them together. Because I didn't want to talk by text. Like, I'm not gonna be at work texting you about our biggest issues right now. And so finding that creative way to empower her to communicate, which I stumbled upon. I'm not a brilliant person, but I stumbled upon it by the grace of God, and it helped us work through one of the biggest points of tension in our marriage.
What are some other ways that I think that's an excellent to speed her up, slow you down. That's really, I think that's great. Mm-hmm. What are some other ways that you encourage couples to sort of get into that same space?
It's usually individual, like you were just describing. There's usually an individual work required, and then you meet together. So if the talker needs to breathe, literally breathe, just take a beat, I need to think and pause before I speak because I just naturally have a lot of energy. I show up with all my words. If you're that person in the relationship, pause just a beat. It doesn't have to be for 5 days unless your partner needs 5 days to process. And then you're going to have to twiddle your thumbs for 5 days and remind yourself that you're not alone and you don't need to be anxious and they're coming. The conversation will occur. So that might be the work of that person. And the other, like you're describing, is I have to intentionally find my words. I can't ignore it because this person often it's less easy to find and it's more work. And so it's easier to just ignore it and say, I'm fine. That was a day, that was then, this is now, and now I'm not as mad or now I'm not as hurt. So it'll be fine until the next time. And then the next time, and then there's a huge explosion and it's like, what just happened? I don't even understand. So it's really, I think, the individual work first and the intentional decision that the work is important and I value you and I value us. And so I'm going to do my job before we come together. And then we're going to have our time to talk about what we figured out. And I'm going to make sure I ask lots of great, open-ended questions, be like therapists, use those open-ended questions. And then I'm going to try really hard to speak up. And even if I'm scared or fumbling with my words, I'm going to say it anyway. And we're going to try, we're going to see how it goes and kind of have an attitude of trial and error and don't be afraid to make mistakes.
I think that's some really great advice. Do you still do love languages? Is that still a thing?
Not as much, to be honest. Not as much. I mean, people are familiar with it, but
sure.
But
it's seeped into pop culture. Like it's seeped into secular culture. It's really
we were
wild.
laughing the other day about how when you're
when
you're first married, everybody's like words of affirmation, physical, and now we're all like 20 years in. Everybody's just acts of service. You're like,
there's too much to do.
Andy is like, I'm like, I just want to encourage you. He's like, well, then maybe you could do the dishes.
I would feel so encouraged.
Could you do a load of laundry? It's so true. I think it just all melts into acts of service.
Yeah.
And all the other love languages are kind of lazy.
Yeah.
I was wondering if that's a thing. And it's kind of like not as much of a thing.
Not as much of a thing. Yeah. I still hear some of that, but not as much. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Good.
Well, I really do like that picture. I really do like that picture of, anyway, an unevenness. So thank you so much for visiting with us today. We do normally have a final question. And so the final question today is, what do you do that drives your children the most crazy? What is something you do that drives your children the most crazy?
Wow. Do you have something? That's
I do.
Always my follow-up question to your question is,
it came up so quickly that
I'm sure it's much easier with teenagers than it is with my age children to figure out what drives them crazy.
I'm sure it is. And actually, I think my daughter and I could probably go to counseling because I think we're in that power struggle where I am the absolute talker, cannot stop talking. My daughter's like, I really don't want to talk right now. Yeah. I don't think we even want to be spending time together right now. And I'm like so needy. Like because I see it all coming to an end, right? I see it all changing. And for me, it's like holding on to gold. And for her, it's like, yeah, we've been doing this for a while now and I'm ready to move on with my life.
Tina Fey has a joke about that where she's talking about when your kids get older, especially teenage daughters, where you start feeling like someone has a crush on somebody.
Yes.
And you're like, hey, we're going to be eating dinner downstairs if you want to join us. It's cool if you don't, but like, we're all going to be watching the movie after.
Justin,
if you want to come.
That is absolutely true. Like I got a new board game. I'm like, we got a new board game. If you want to come and try it out, what is it? It's Ticket to Ride Europe. That sounds dumb. Yeah, I thought so too. I'm really mad that we bought that. But so I'm so curious about her life. And what she probably doesn't know that I know, that her whole life has been a 15-year unfolding drama of friends and, crushes. And now the drama is finally getting really interesting of all these characters. Mm-hmm. And now all of a sudden she just doesn't want to talk about it.
Oh, no.
And so she gets in the car and it is a barrage of questions. That's what drives her the most crazy. She's had to limit me to like 12 questions, 23 questions. Yeah. She's like, Mom.
Still very fair number. I mean, that's a generous number she's giving you.
Wow. I'm like, who did you sit with at lunch? How's so-and-so doing? Are they so-and-so, so-and-so? Is that still there? What did their mom say about that? And what do they think about this? And what do you think? And finally, I'm just realizing that just because I want to know really badly, she does not want to tell me. Yeah. So the questions, it drives her absolutely crazy.
Yeah. I think for me, my kids are young. And so I think I'm constantly redirecting them in the way they communicate with us. It'll be like, I want milk. And I'm like, that's a really weird way to ask for milk, and I'm sure that there's going to come a point where they're like, can I please have some milk, and they're getting to the point where they can serve themselves. So it's not as big of a deal, but I'm constantly like nitpicking. I don't want to say nitpicking, but like when they make demands of us, like we're their servants, I'm like, that's a really weird way to ask for
That'll
that.
pay off.
I was going to say, that's a good one. Don't stop that.
That'll pay off one.
Yeah.
I did not
keep that.
I should have done that more. What about you, Brittany?
So we are, my husband and I, y'all know my husband, we are grammar cops in our house. And so I have no doubt my children, he does the lie, like when that one, I'm less clear on the distinction of when. He's taught me quite a bit and called me out so much that I've learned a lot there, but I'm big on the imperfect tense when you're speaking conditionally, like if I were, as opposed to if I was. So I will always correct those, which is not as necessary as what you're describing. That is not as necessary, but
would it be
still helpful? They're going to look really smart one day.
If I were, is it because that's we are? Wait, no, it's were. I don't think I even know. If I was to come over,
if I were,
but what if it's we? Was it
if we were?
It would be like if we were to come over rather than if I was to come over. That would be the difference.
Because was is like we came over, right?
Exactly. Was happened.
Sure.
Were is if was happened.
Right. You guys all know. Like you guys are like even giggling like grammar.
Nerds, total nerds.
Just important.
Total nerds. So do they ever, or do they just exasperate it with like, okay, got it. Thanks.
One day they'll get it.
Yeah. I mean, I've often wondered actually if they intentionally
to get a rise out
yeah,
of you.
well, but it's not even a rise. I'm like, is this a bid for connection? Like, let's pull in Gottman. Like, like, is this, I don't know. I mean, maybe that's me being optimistic about it and really hoping that they do get it. And so maybe they're just intentionally not.
I'm sure they'll get it. And eventually that'll be their thing with other people.
Oh,
it'll be like, I can't stand to listen to their grammar. We're done.
Well, your kids are so sweet and so smart and both have their own really unique like proficiencies. And so I'm sure
they
you've
are
got
really
different,
cool kids.
different responses, but they're really
I like
cool.
them.
Cool kids.
I like them a lot.
me and Will have the same shirt that we wear almost every other Sunday to church.
They do.
Are you serious?
Yeah, they do.
It's just a comfy shirt.
It's a Target shirt.
Yeah,
it's great.
Shirt.
It's comfortable.
So I always see
it's church
it.
appropriate.
Yeah, it's got buttons on it. It's perfect.
You guys look at each other matchers.
Yeah.
Well, Brittany, thank you so much for being with us today.
Absolutely.
It's been so good to get your insight. And man, thank you for being on the show.
Yes.
And Justin, you're going to do some wrap up.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, if you want to learn more about Brittany's counseling work, we will put a link in our description so you can follow that up. See if you have any interest in learning more about that. We'd love for you to rate, review, and subscribe to this podcast. Also, we are doing video. And so if you're listening right now, you can watch us on YouTube. The link is in the description. Or if you go to youtube.com/CityRise.org, you can find a playlist there of all of our 2 shows that have been videoed now.
Both of them.
We're moving
I
on.
know. The second show.
One.
Wow.
Yeah. And so we're just really thankful for you
put
listening.
the first one you put the first one up? I didn't think you were going to post that
It's
one.
on YouTube. The whole world can see it. Your mom can watch it. I will say I sent it to you and Andy, and there's been 15 views, and I know I haven't watched it.
Of our YouTube
times.
video?
Yeah, have you watched it 15 times? That's what I thought.
I was like, look at this outfit.
Okay, but great. So we'd love you to rate, review, subscribe. If you're a new listener, work your way backwards. And if you love this, share it with somebody. If you're encouraged by it, lots of great advice and thoughts about counseling and deconstruction and marriage, and just a lot of great stuff in this episode in particular. So make sure to send it to someone that you think would enjoy it.
Yes, that's it. We hope you've had an amazing time on the Almost Amazing Dinner Party.
You kind of did that wrong.
Thank you for being,
You didn't say almost amazing.
Oh, okay. I'll say, okay.
We hope you said we hope you had an amazing time.
Oh, okay.
And that's not our catchphrase. This is the 96th episode.
That's so exciting. The 96th. All right, I'll do it. Here we go. We hope you've had an almost amazing time on the Almost Amazing Dinner Party show.
You did it.